Welcome to the Paranormal M community, where we present stories that'll leave you questioning the boundaries of the natural world. Subscribe and turn on notifications to keep pace with our latest enigmatic tales. We hope you enjoy the journey into the unknown. My Grand Aunt Helen. My dad has an older sister named Eva, named after my dad's younger sister who died very young and under very weird circumstances that nobody discusses, nor my dad knows. My grandpa had two sisters, Ava and one named Helen. Grand Aunt Helen used to believe very much in dreams, and from what Dad told me, she used to predict things via dreams, just like me. When Grand Aunt Ava died, Grand Aunt Helen saw her in her dreams, telling her to tell my grandma, my dad's mom and her sister-in-law, that she'll come back in the form of the new baby my grandma was about to have, and that they'll give her her name. My grandma at the time had no idea she was even pregnant, and my Grand Aunt Helen told my grandma, who then told my grandpa, and together went to the doctor, who told them that they were indeed expecting. My Aunt Ava was born and named just like that. Many years later, my Grand Aunt Helen was close to dying when my dad introduced her to my mom after they got engaged. And my Grand Aunt Helen smiled and said to my mom that she'll make two strong fighter girls yet, and she'll suffer heartbreak and loss as a mother until those girls are born. My mom was a little creeped out by her, but smiled and thanked her. 9 months later, my mom miscarried a baby boy. Then a year after that, I came along, and I was a high-risk pregnancy, and my mom was worried about me. So she went to church where the head nun, who was a family friend of hers, sat next to her and said I would be fine, and that I'm a fighter. Mom looked shocked at her, as I was told. But because those words reminded her of the words of how my great-grandmother Helen was speaking. I was born dead. I choked by the umbilical cord, and all the doctors and nurses were ready to pronounce me dead when my mom's very good friend, who was a nurse on the team, started shaking me while holding me upside down. She softly hit my chest to restart my heart. I was dead for 20 minutes before I came back. I was also premature, so I was stuck in the hospital for 2 additional months. My sister was born with no complications, thank God, but she suffered a lot as a toddler with pneumonia to the point that she was close to death, but she pulled through. Recently, while I was told the first story from my dad about his Aunt Helen, Mom remembered what she had been told by her, and they told me how they're being surprised and shocked by how true my grandaunt's predictions about me and my sister both were. I believe we both face challenges, but the biggest ones are those that has to do with health, and I'm currently fighting to pull through. And every time I'm ready to give up, I remind myself of the words my Grand Aunt Helen told my dad. Flick the switch, numb, wake up. I was 8 years old when it happened. It was Thursday, when at night at 1 a.m. I lay awake on my bed crying, as I usually did. Thursday had been hard because in the morning at school, the kids threw my bag out of the window, cut my hair, slapped me, and my quote-unquote personal bully had kicked me in the stomach. At home, my sister was grumpy and had glitter all over her face and eyebrows, so it was hard to wash it off because she was whining and not wanting to bathe. She didn't eat the food I cooked, and she wouldn't sit down and do her homework with my aid or let me do the homework. I went to my English class without finishing my homework, and my performance was very poor, and I got yelled at for it. Then when I returned home, Mom was waiting for me to go to physiotherapy. She suffered from lupus, and it was after surgeries back-to-back that lasted for 3 years, and now she was on the road of recovery. When we returned home, she was disappointed with how she has gone so much and just started yelling at me for how incompetent of a daughter I was, and how much of a disappointment I was. That left me crying in my room. So at night, as always, I sobbed while shoving my covers in my mouth so I won't wake anybody up, when thoughts of how everybody would be happier if I died, and I started to imagine my death, and I started to imagine my funeral. But the mental image of my baby sister holding her teddy bear crying over my grave made me stop thinking about it. The only thought that kept circling in my head was, and I'm quoting and translating, "Please, God, take away my pain, make me numb so I can take it." That's what was circling around in my head as sleep took me over. The next day I woke up at 7 a.m. as usual and complete my routine in autopilot. It was when I was standing outside and our building was waiting for best friends that Nikki and Polly come to meet us. So we start to leave our younger siblings to the schools, as usual, when I noticed how it was apathetic and numb. I just shrugged and went on with my day, until I was made fun of after a failed match of volleyball when it happened. It was my personal bully hitting me in the head, calling me stupid when I jumped up and pushed him away from me. Then I left the class. When I returned for class, everything was okay. When the bell rang and signals for the break, when my personal bully and I were left alone in the room, and he turned and he said that I was stupid, and I had had it. I jumped up and grabbed the school's desk. Mind you, the desks aren't that heavy so you can lift them with two hands easily, but I got so angry with my bully's anger that it drove me madder than I usually was, and I threw it at him. The desk didn't fly, but it fell in front of him, and I got madder that it didn't hit him, so I picked up a chair and threw it at him, and I hit him in the end of his eyebrow. He looked scared of me, left me alone. When he left me, I suddenly felt calm again. That sudden flicker of emotions. I went from feeling nothing to immense anger. That will continue for years. I was 13 when I was in school, and I was walking with my two best friends, Nikki and Polly. And they were talking about a guy both girls liked when I felt a pain in my head and chest, and my heartbeat got faster, and I grew hotter. The girls saw my discomfort and walked up to me and asked me if I was all right. When I tried to look at them, I felt the sun behind them blinding me, and I said that I'm just going to go back to class. When I went back to class and sat down, I don't remember what happened next, but I blink and I'm in the middle of class, and I don't recall the sound of the bell or anything. I asked, just confused, to my best friend Nikki, and she told me that we talked about our afternoon get-together and watched the Vampire Diaries on our TVs. I pretended to remember, and I shut up. Still can't recall what happened in the blank memory. Throughout my second year of junior high, I was getting into so many fights, mostly because they were bullying me, but I was using all the self-defense my dad was teaching me since I was 4 years old. And most fights are blank in my mind, but I know 3 or 4 of them. An accident that worries me now that I'm thinking about is this. My then best friend Nikki was saying something along the lines of how she didn't believe me, that I knew self-defense, when I suddenly got very, very angry that suddenly I was choking her. She was sitting on top of the desk when I started to choke her. I had forcefully made her lie down on the desk. I don't remember how I pulled away from her, or really what happened after that, but I know that after that, Nikki was avoiding me. I apologized to her about me choking her, and she accepted my apology, and our friendship was continuing. After the second junior high year, we moved back to my mom's hometown. The first half of my third year of junior high felt as if I was sleepwalking. It was when one day a girl was bullying me but had no idea because I had my headphones on, but she ripped them out of my ears and slapped me angrily that I was ignoring her. I was reading a very well-written fanfiction, and I was listening to 'Bastille'. Those things were far from important than her bullying me. when the feeling of numbness was replaced by this very hot wave of anger. I slapped her and then walked away. I was so angry, yet I knew I shouldn't be. I was walking inside the building when I saw another student. He laughed at me knowing what was going on in the playground. I punched him, and my hand crashed into the aluminum door. My hand should have hurt, but it didn't. That day I was returning from school and I was walking through the streets, and I felt this sudden shift in me, and suddenly I started to cry, sobbing. After that, I felt everything. I was so emotional that it made me feel as if I was drowning. I didn't understand why suddenly I was so emotional, why I was so emotionless prior to it. Then I was sleeping one day when I was awakened by a memory of 8-year-old me wishing to be numb. Grand Aunt or Grandma Eugenia. Let's call my Grand Aunt Eugenia my grandmother Eugenia. My grandma Eugenia died when my little sister was around 1 year old, and I was 6 years old. My actual grandma, my mom's mom, took it especially hard since Eugenia was, I think, the youngest sibling of the 9 siblings my grandma's family had. I remember holding my baby sister in my arms as my mom, newly out of one of the surgeries that she had, was holding her. Well, there's a picture here, but it looks like a vertical rectangle with the bottom missing. Anyhow, they're using the shape to describe the crutches. While she was holding on to her crutches in her arms and begging her mom to unlock her room's door. It's the first and only time I heard my mom calling my grandma mommy and crying. I remember being taken to the middle room and forced to watch cartoons, only for me to change the channel to space documentaries and playing in the local channel. I had a very weird feeling. I can't describe it, but maybe the closest I can describe it to is kind of like the discomfort that I was having looking around me, worrying, and I was holding my sister in an iron hug, so much that my sister bit my arm in order to let her roam the room. I don't remember if I saw anything, though. Until I became 12 years old, I caused my grandma to break her hip because I was throwing a temper tantrum before and throughout the church service. And after communion, I ran out of the building and my grandma had to run after me, dragging my 6-year-old sister with her. She tripped over the new floor. It was marble. Broke her hip. My sister ran to me and told me about Grandma. I was taken by an old student of my grandma's and we went to the ER. I was hungry and thirsty, but I suddenly, mid-sentence, jumped up. I said I was sorry and started walking towards an empty room. I felt as if I should see someone, but I didn't. Dizzy and nauseous, I returned to my seat. 2 months later, I grounded for my causing of my grandma's injury, And as I was eating some homemade ice cream my dad made and watching TV, my punishment was not allowed to go outside when suddenly at 18:05 p.m., on the dot, shut down with my new spoon of ice cream when I got my first anxiety attack. And one of the worst I ever suffered. I fainted from the pain in my chest. That's when I saw it. I was in a hospital room. Everything was hazy and white, and there Grandma Eugenia was there, dressed in a white hospital gown and sitting next to my grandma's bed and crying. I apologized for harming my grandma, and she said that I should apologize to my grandma if she survives her heart attack. I looked afraid at my unconscious grandma, and she's pale white. Then I ran out of the room crying only to find myself lost in corridors in a hospital. Then I felt my chest being in pain and I regained my senses, and my ice cream spilled on the couch and the floor and the bowl was broken on the floor. In my hand I held the spoon though. Then the phone rang and it was my Aunt Helena. telling me that Grandma had a heart attack just before she entered another hip reconstruction surgery, and instead of that surgery, she got a pacemaker in her heart. The moving chair with an old man sitting on it. This experience happened to my little sister, a female, 16 years old, when she was 3 years old. I learned of it yesterday after my dad, her, and I sat in the living room of our late maternal grandaunt Eugenia's home. We were reminiscing about the old times. The old times when most of our grandparents were alive and living in this 3-apartment building, and how fun it was to meet for lunch and breakfast with them, and in general having them and my cousins from Australia around. Those were the best family summers in me and my sister's memories. And slowly the conversation shifted into the paranormal. Sightings our family's gone through since the women in both sides of the family have some sort of gift. Dad started sharing his ghost sightings when my sister hesitantly shared this. Please note that the time of the event was late in the afternoon and I was present, but I was 8 years old and I did notice that my sister was behaving weirdly, but I was too busy eating ice cream. The experience goes like this. She was 3 years old and she was too bored to walk on her feet, so she started to crawl and pretend to be a dog, barking at her grandmas. When she met them in the hallway towards the first kitchen, yeah, we had 2 kitchens and 2 bathrooms, when my sister grabbed some water and then stole some pie from the fridge. That's when the second kitchen comes into play, where she grabs a plate. As she was eating, she saw Grand Aunt Eugenia, and she was scolded for eating the dessert before dinner. Defeated, my sister returns to the living room and joins us in the dining room, and she saw the rocking chair by the second terrace's door, and it was moving, and an old man dressed in a tuxedo and smoking a cigar, sitting on it, rocking back and forth while smoking. My sister recalls that she had crawled to him, and she barked at him, which caused him to laugh at her, and motioned for her to sit next to him. My sister then asked him who he was. He says that he was Grand Uncle Takis, and he was just watching his siblings and his nieces and nephews, and now grandnieces and grandnephews. She sat by him for a while and she played with some leaves that had been blown in the open windows and terrace doors all around the house when she was asking. Well, she asked him why none of our grandparents introduced him to us. He said that he didn't need to be introduced. He knew all of us, and that he'd been watching us. Then my sister stood up and said goodbye to him because she wanted to come outside to play with me. She then says that she looked for him around the house but didn't find him. She asked around about Grand Uncle Takis and everyone ignored her, or said that there was no one by that name. Flash forward to last year when my sister and our mom were going through some old documents and photos, when my sister found a photo taken in 1957. It apparently showed that he was the oldest son of the maternal great-grandma, and he had died from cancer in that very same chair in 1958. And his real name was Christophorus Thomas Bozinakis. Bozinakis? Bozinekis. And he was Granduncle Themios. Actual name was Ephemios, the male equivalent to the name Eva, older twin brother. All my life I felt very uncomfortable sitting in that chair because I felt as if I was intruding. Now I think I know why. I never knew the language, but this word came to my mind, and I saw how it was written when instinctively I closed my eyes a second later. Not the first time it happened. Some things about me before I start in order to understand. For generations, both sides of my family, maternal and paternal, have been able to do weird things according to stories and experiences that I've heard. and it's especially in women. It's stronger on my mom's side, though. My dad's side, not so much. Also, there's schizophrenia running in that side, so many things I've heard could be that illness. I grew up with my dad's sister showing schizophrenia, and as a child, I was unofficially seen by a psychiatrist, just because he was there for my aunt. And I had seen her breakdown, so my dad worried about my mental health. One of those times I heard the psychiatrist warn my dad about possibly having depression and anxiety, which I have been battling since I was 8. I'm in a better place with no medication for that. Yet, women on my mom's side of the family can and could see the dead in their sleep. They had astral projected and saw car accidents and last moments of loved ones. Saw entire days in the dreams. And we were raised to respect our ancestors just as much as the Orthodox Christian saints, the faith I was raised in. As for my dad's side of the family, there are claims of seeing precognitive dreams and the dead. I do believe in precognitive dreams because I and my sister have them, but the dead, I'm sure it was the schizophrenia. Now things get weird with me. I started showing signs, a 10-year-old child, but no one noticed besides some grandaunts and my grandmas who warned me not to stand upon this and keep using my normal senses. They never taught me how to control or really what it was. It was a known secret in my family, though. I was always told that I acted older than I was, then started acting weird, asking weird questions, saying things before I could stop myself, and they later came true. The déjà vu, the precognitive dreams, the déjà revu, or rêve, predicting that a woman I had merely days known was 3 weeks pregnant before she even knew it herself. I was many times told to be careful what I said, and when people learned I was born on Saturday, they would say that I too should be careful. In Greece, being born on Saturday is maybe a gift or a curse to others, or at least that's what I was told when I was pressed for more answers about grandmother of a classmate. They started to curse my name and family in Pontiac dialect the moment she learned what day I was born, and almost kicked me out of my friend's house. Then I learned that I was born dead and revived 20 minutes later, and on the same day at the same time in the other side of Greece, my mom's dead suffered a stroke. I think they mean my mom's dad suffered a stroke and flatlined for the exact amount of time, and the first words he spoke before falling into a coma were, "I saved her now. Now she has to fight." To my aunt, his oldest daughter. When I learned that being born dead on Saturday was far worse according to my grand aunt, I stopped liking my birthday. Now on to the main reason for posting. A couple of minutes ago I was watching a YouTube video of Trey Kennedy, comedian of sorts, when the word mobe came to my mind, but pronounced Mombe. Yet I saw it being written M-O-B-E. I instantly Google translated, and the language that put me in was Sana. So I Googled the language, which is Cypriotian Arabic language, if I translate it correctly from Greek to English. Never heard that language before in my life, and according to Google Translate, mobe, or mobi, or mumbe, means bad. And mumbe, with the E at the end, means cow. It's the third time something like this has happened, but the second time with the word of a language that I never heard before. The first one being the word sitma, which according to Google Translate it means in the seat in Gujarati, an Indian language, according to my research. I still remember my dad's look when I said sitma, just before I opened the kitchen cupboard. And you know what we were talking about? He had asked me where his folded clothes were, and soon enough, they were in the seat behind him. He looked confused and asked me what I had said. I turned and told him that I didn't know, that it just came out, and then pointed to the clothes and said in Greek, They're in the seat behind you. The third time was the word aboriginals, and I don't know why. What's happening, and what is that? Why does it happen? I think a ghost of a loved one didn't like calling myself ugly. Disclaimer. I don't know if our house is haunted, but the house was built in 1978, and before the apartment block existed, it was farms. Yet the house was my maternal grandmother's and my mom's childhood home. And I, my sister, I guess I and my sister have felt various weird things from a warm protective hand on our back. And to my sister's sensing, a black figure in her room and weird noise when everyone's asleep in the house, building, and neighborhood. So back to the experience. An hour ago, my sister, 16-year-old female, and I, 21-year-old female, were talking. I wanted her input on an idea I had, on how to start building up my educational portfolio in case I need to find a more remote online job. When Greek Quarantine, the sequel, starts in the following months and I can't find an actual job. She wanted to let me know that a guy that I used to date, apparently dating my best friend, and saw my sister yesterday. That was at her hangout spot, and started flirting with another girl just in front of her, knowing that the news would reach my best friend. My sister thought that she saw the guy shamelessly cheat on my best friend, and she was fuming about it. But they had broken up a couple of weeks ago, so it was okay for him to do that. He was a free man. Then the conversation shifted to why my sister has more luck with guys than me. She's cuter in my opinion. The weather today wasn't windy, so the curtain was just still when I went on to say that my sister has more luck because she's cuter, and I'm always the ugly friend. Just then the curtain blew from the inside towards the outside, like somebody blasted it out of anger, and then it remained levitating for 4 seconds before it went still, as if it never happened. Then my sister and I continued talking like it didn't happen, but my sister's bedroom door slammed shut, and then I choked on my own spit when I tried to talk again. I had a coughing fit, which is now making my throat pretty scratchy. All that made me give up on the conversation and just went to the sunroom where my computer is, only to find my computer's screen open while it was black before. It was open and music was playing from my YouTube tab, and all of this was prior to having lunch. I was listening to 1930s jazz, and I had stopped it, but now it was playing like it never stopped. It's happened many times that I leave my computer open and go do something else, and there's music blaring from the headphones from the YouTube tab I've left open, like somebody pressed play on the playlist I had left closed. I think my grandma or grandpa came to check on how the cakes turned out, and my camera's AI feature caught them for a moment. This happened only a few minutes ago. I had just taken out of the oven my freshly baked vanilla and cinnamon raisin cake, and I wanted to snap a photo of them to send to my best friend and my aunt. My camera had the AI option activated, because I forgot to disable it after my outing on Friday night. So, as I turned my camera towards the kitchen table, the AI sign showed 1 second and the food sign since I snapped a picture of the cakes, and the next one facing the kitchen table and the kitchen door, and it showed the person sign. The person sign appears when an AI feature detects a person's presence. The thing is that I was alone. My parents are and were napping, and my sister was in her room studying. My aunt is working at her boyfriend's family farm trying to finish before sundown and the rain comes. The house is my mom's and my aunt's childhood home, and my grandma lived in it since 1983 up to 2017, when she died in her sleep in her room, otherwise known as my parents' current bedroom. All of us have experienced something that might be considered as a presence, either by feeling a hand on our backs, shoulders, or heads, as I gave mention before in other posts. But never on camera or radio, although my computer at times opens by itself in the middle of the night or day when it's in sleep mode, but I don't think that has anything to do with a ghost. I found it odd. Didn't feel a presence. And the person sign remained for a moment when I placed the camera in the same spot again a second or so after I realized what had happened. And it showed nothing. If there's a ghost after all, I think it's either my grandma or my grandpa, or both of them keeping an eye on us. Maybe they, she, or he wanted to see how the cakes turned out. My blue shirt. I was packing my things to head to my college city for my residency, and due to the overwhelmingly hot weather that came out of nowhere, I had to unpack my summer clothes to take with me. I chose my best shirts, and as I was refolding them, I would try to think about the outfit options, trying to measure for how many days these outfits will last me when my mind drifted off topic, as it usually does. When my mind went back to the current topics, the war in Ukraine, climate change, my country's economy, and about my future, I wondered about what's become of us as humanity when I started mechanically folding my shirts. And I picked up my blue shirt. My blue shirt has letter prints on it that I usually weren't able to make out or tried to. I bought it from a Chinese thrift store, and I knew it really wouldn't make any sense since many times the shirts have grammatical errors or the sentences are just gibberish. I pick up my shirt to take a better look at it and see if the sleeve length is good and the weather, and I saw the shirt's letterprint, and weirdly I could make it out. It wrote, "What we think we became," and I froze. Found it very, very odd. Chocolate from the sky. I'm in Turin, or Torino, Italy, with the Erasmus Exchange program, and yesterday I was on an escalator exiting the metro station at the Dante stop, and there was a man before me, his bag and jacket closed. He was about 2 steps away from me. As we approached the end of the escalator, suddenly a chocolate plaque fell out of nowhere, missing my head by a few inches. I was shocked. I instantly thought that the man before me had somehow lost it and grabbed it and run just to give it back to him. Thank God the guy spoke English, and he said that he hadn't lost a chocolate plaque, and joked that this is just a present for me by the gods, or the universe. We both looked up and around us to make sure that someone wasn't looking for the chocolate, and then we parted ways, laughing at this odd incident. So I returned to my hotel room exhausted because a long day, just baffled by this chocolate and the shared incident. So I shared this with my roommate. She couldn't believe it either. We opened the chocolate, and as we ate it, I realized that it had berries in it, which I'm allergic to. I rushed to go get my anti-allergic pills, or anti-allergy pills, and then I timed my reaction just in case I needed medical attention. My roommate is studying the package, and she realizes that the chocolate has expired in October of 2022. Shocked once more, I'm left wondering, how did that chocolate plaque fall from the sky? No one was out in the balconies around the area, and no one was looking for it. Mangoes. Monday morning, I started having a mild allergic reaction to something because my eyes were itching and I was sneezing the entire day. Dad says he's planning to buy dried mangoes to add to our cereals, and this was around October just for fun if the price isn't too high. Monday late evening, I'm at evening night school sitting in programming, theory class, while also working on a year-long essay about AI on my school computer, while my eyes are just feeling terrible since stepping foot on the school grounds at 8 p.m., and it was now 10 p.m. My eyes are starting to water, and they're so red. So I turned to open Facebook to ask my mom if I could do something to alleviate this pain. When my computer gets an alert. Hi, pollen in your area. 75%. Take caution. Beware of allergic reactions. I press the alert for more information because I'm slowly panicking. I've been allergic to pollen since I was a baby. It's an allergy that's stuck by me for 24 years. My town is in the red and orange part, and my area is surrounded by farms. I checked, and mango and grass pollen is on the rise. Mango pollen is at 70% and grass at 5%. I text my mom and she advises me that when I return home I should wash my eyes, so I do that. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., I wake up from the feeling of my eyes being on fire. I go to the bathroom to see the white part of the iris being pink and red. And my under eyelid was also red. I wash my face and put some eye drops and I go back to bed. I dream about mangoes again, and this time I'm cutting pieces to feed my dream daughter. Throughout Tuesday, the word mangoes and the fruit appeared on my TikTok. At least 7 times. My sister's best friend visited, and one of them were eating Greek yogurt with mango pieces in it. While my sister, as she was getting ready, she asked for lip balm, and her other friend had one, you guessed it, mango-flavored. After they left, I went to spend some time with my aunt, who was watching a trivia game on TV. And the word was mango. We also played a trivia game, and mangoes came up twice. Painting my nails while hanging out with her, and I want to put on some hand cream, and she gives me one that had a mango scent. It's Wednesday today, and I heard the word mangoes 3 times before 6 p.m. I'm in class again, and I decided to check the pollen levels because my eyes are still itchy and sore. Still in the 75% range, but now you can add ambrosia, the plant, to the mix that's responsible for the pollen levels. Annoyed, I decided to Google ambrosia plant farms and mango farms in my area. That's what came up, with a big fat nothing. None of those are native to my country or area. I've had a few times in my life mangoes, but mostly the dried and sugar-added ones. I'm not a huge fan to say that I've been craving them. Why am I hearing about mangoes so much? Is the universe trying to tell me something? Or is it just a coincidence? I haven't heard a word this much in my life. Thoughts? My thought is now I want mangoes. Please help. Followed home from cemetery. I've always been somewhat in tune with the spiritual world or realm, and I've been like this for my whole life. I don't communicate with spirits with words, but I am able to sense their presence and oftentimes identify the emotions that come with said presence. I believe myself to have felt and identified sorrow, confusion, dread, anger, and aggression. I've found that it's uncommon for earthbound, bodiless spirits to be exuding positive emotions. I'm also an empath, and I'm capable of perceiving human emotions that are not verbally or physically expressed. This includes what's presented in real time, as well as the energy that's absorbed into walls, structures, and soil. Some houses just feel like they hold like a history of abuse in them, if that makes sense. Walls listen, and walls talk. I'm capable of making the distinction between a presence that comes from an existing body and a presence that exists without a human body. I feel bodiless entities in my chest and torso, and especially in my forearms. It's difficult to explain, but it's kind of like the feeling you get when you know you're not alone. Static in my veins, almost like my arm falls asleep. Despite my understanding that many, if not most, earthbound spirits exude negativity, I still feel very welcomed and safe in cemeteries. I love cemeteries. I feel like they're places where people typically don't go with bad intentions, and while they frequently carry sorrow onto the grounds, I do believe grief to simply be a form of unreciprocated love. When I go to a cemetery, I feel a lot of heavy, thick sorrow. but also an air of love and longing. It fluctuates throughout the grounds and feels almost like a sea of waves to walk through. When I visit cemeteries, I usually just pop in for a few minutes and breathe it all in, turn the car off, and listen with my body. I've taken to doing this as a way of honing my skills with connectivity, to just stop relying on my 5 primary senses, to see the world around me and give my soul a chance to listen. I typically don't do any video or voice recording, nor do I take pictures. I used to when I was younger, but now I just stop to feel the energies and presence of whatever or whomever might make itself apparent to me. At the cemetery. Recently, we, which is myself and my roommate, discovered Mount Olivet Cemetery in Fort Worth, Texas, which is modeled after the original in Tennessee. Olivet is not a typo, by the way. Olivet. 180 acres, over a dozen lots, multiple statues, a variety of headstones, laser-etched marble, a lake, crypts, urns, fantastic cemetery all around, filled with trees, too. Upon first finding this place, we spend an hour just driving around and around, looking at it all, taking it in, marveling at the evidence of beautiful, unique forms of grieving that one might find in a cemetery. We then left to get coffee and food and returned just as the sun set and the grounds were considered closed. There were still others there, a few mourners and a group of kids that looked to possibly be doing some form of ghost hunting, so we decided to get out and wander on foot. It got too cold for this, so we eventually went back to the car and just began driving around like we did before. We were probably there for an hour after dark. And about 15 minutes in, I feel compelled to do some recording. I started with voice, then switched to video. Didn't even think to take pictures. And I want to say that we have about half an hour of audio, and possibly an accumulative 15 minutes of video. But they're on my roommate's phone and she's out right now. I'll update these times soon. We'll also share the videos and audio if I can. Nothing noteworthy occurred during recording in walking in the grounds. We did hear an anguished cry, but I firmly believe it was a mourner struggling with loss. I felt not much more than I typically do at cemeteries, except at one point I got very nervous. I assumed it was just jitters and shoved it down. Roommate got nervous too, so he left. Second cemetery. After making the drive back home from Olivet, I stop at the local cemetery. Not comfortable sharing my location, but it's small, like 2 to 3 acres. As it's the one that I visit most frequently, and I just like the vibe there. The most negativity I've felt there was severe confusion and anguish that seemed localized to a cement bench that my roommate felt too. We both opened our mouths to say something about it at the same time. Very cool because she doesn't have a history with stuff like this like I do. But it wasn't directed at us and stayed where we quote-unquote found it. Every time I visited, the energies just kind of revolve around themselves, or stick to their part of the cemetery. They kind of do their own thing and at most just seem to notice me. But this time was weirdly different. I go into the cemetery, my roommate is like on off asleep at this point, and it's super late because I drove around for a long time before heading home. When I drive into the cemetery and turn the car off, it wakes her up. She asks where we are, and I say such and such cemetery, and she says that she wants to go home and appears kind of restless about it. As soon as she says that, I feel something in the field behind us. When you enter the cemetery, there's a fence to your right with a field opposite it, so when you turn to face the graves at the end of the driveway, your back is to this empty field. I've never felt anything in the field before. Not happy, not welcoming, directed at us. Get out fast. Not threatening exactly, but firm, as though it didn't, or if I didn't listen, it would become threatening. Difficult to explain. I do a 3-point turn because the drive is small and this feeling gets louder and more adamant as I take even longer to get the fuck out. I finally repositioned the car and sped off, almost hit one of those cement benches driving out. which would have been a total tragedy for the car. I just have never once felt that borderline threat, I'm giving you to the count of 3 kind of energy directed at me at the cemetery, let alone my local one. So it's usually so welcoming and soft in there, it's kind of strange. We get home within 3 minutes and I feel fine, just confused as to why I felt something angry in that field. We try to review our recordings in the car before going inside, but my roommate falls asleep. This is normal, she's borderline narcoleptic. I watch one video and listen to 5 minutes of audio, then save the rest for later. The things I can't explain. I had just come to a new country with my friend and try to find jobs and stay, start a new life and escape my country's crisis. And this was in 2016. On the 3rd day of being here, I went out with my friend to familiarize ourselves with the city and explore around. We were walking downtown and I saw a young man entering a building. For no reason, or at least one that I can explain. I touched the building like tap, 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 as I tell my friend I'm gonna go work in a place like this, that nobody knows what they do and what secrets they have. You know what? I'll work exactly here. We laugh and continue walking. A little while after that, we take the bus to go back to where we were staying. When we're on the bus, I get a phone call. Hey, Elefantaguero, we got your CV and wanted to talk to you. I had applied online to a few jobs that day before, and as soon as I got a SIM card, she invites me for an interview and gives me the address. When I got off the phone, I tell my friend that I had an interview, and we Google the address that she gave me. It was the building I had touched just a while earlier, and we freaked out. I ended up getting the job, too. They sponsored my visa. They said it was the first time for them attempting to sponsor someone's visa, but they'd try for me. I met my husband there. And even though I had some awful times there, I recognized how much it helped me and made my immigration process pretty easy. I worked there for over 2 years and then moved to another city. After I moved, they changed the company's name and some people were arrested because they had some money laundering going on. So not only did I guess that I was going to work exactly there, but they had some secrets most people didn't know about. It was a legitimate call center for a USA phone carrier for all I knew. When I said that, I didn't know why I said it. I just saw some guy going in, and I saw a building with big dark glass windows, and I just said it. When I did, we were walking on a sidewalk next to it, and from there I couldn't see the company name until we turned the corner. I had no idea it was one of the companies I had applied to. It was my first time ever walking that street in the city. We still talk about it sometimes, and my friend calls me a witch. A couple of years after, something similar happened, although this time the odds of it happening were bigger. I still felt very weird, though. I lost my access card to the coworker building. I was at an office, and I noticed I had lost it. So I went to the bathroom that I normally used and the kitchen area, as those were the only 2 places other than my office I'd been at that day. I didn't find it. I called the front desk as you usually would leave any lost card you found there, but they said they hadn't seen it or received it. I continued my workday accepting I'd probably have to pay for a new card, but before I left, I went again to that bathroom and walked through some hallways, perhaps trying to trigger a memory or something. And I saw a group of women. I thought, this is stupid. Hundreds of people work at this floor. Asking around won't help. But still felt the urge to ask one for help. So I stop her and I say, Hey, by any chance, do you know of a lost access card? And she says, Oh, it's yours. I was about to drop it at the front desk. Sorry, I didn't have the time to leave it earlier. And who told you I had it? I could only shrug and thank her. Although it's not as crazy as the first one, it was still very weird. She was the only person I asked, other than the front desk people, and she had it. I can remember in my childhood my cousins calling me Boca de Sapo, which in my country is used to refer to somebody who says something and it comes true, usually negative stuff. But I don't remember exactly what things I had guessed in those times. But those two events are very fresh on my memory as they happened just a few years ago. Honestly, if my friend had not been with me on the first one, I would have convinced myself that I had just imagined it or misremembered it. I've also had instances of my husband reading my mind. For example, once I was looking for something in his closet and I felt an object in his shirt's pocket. I thought, but didn't say it, I just thought, oh my God, what if someone slid a cursed object in his pocket to do some witchcraft on him? I don't believe much in witchcraft, as I've met so many frauds and fake witch-con artists, but I guess the idea came from stories people have told me. Anyway, it wasn't anything weird, but from the bed I still see my husband sleeping. And he says, "What witchcraft? Are you doing witchcraft to me?" He then laughs and continues sleeping. On another occasion, I'd woken up and I was laying in bed next to him. I was thinking about where we would put an aquarium in our apartment. We had talked about getting one in previous weeks before, but not super recently, like the day before. Also, I had just woken up just a while before, and he hadn't even woken up. Well, in his sleep, he tells me something about the aquarium and goes on sleeping. In both cases, he said he doesn't remember saying anything. I've asked him for us to experiment and try to recreate it, but he says that he doesn't want to get involved with any weird stuff. Red light dot in the backyard. This happened around 2003 in my parents' home. They had a big backyard that ended in a small forest. Back then, the neighborhood was very isolated, so it was a few streets and all surrounded by forest. One night, a red light dot appeared in the backyard. We saw it when we were out on our front porch, and a cousin was in the alley next to the house looking at the dark backyard. We didn't dare to go check because it was super dark and we were scared kids. But we called the adults, and they saw it too. The light was about 150 meters from our house. It looked as if it was on the ground and would slowly lift up a little and go back down. Stayed there the whole night. My parents were also confused and scared to go check. They joked about it being an entierro. There were legends about burial places where you'd see a light and it would lead you to find gold, the light being the spirit of who was buried. I would think it was a firefly, but I was used to seeing those, and they would glow green or yellowish, and they would blink, not like a strong red. It also wouldn't make sense for a bug to stay in the same place the whole night and just hover slowly up and down in the same place. We decided that that's what we wanted to believe, though, that it was somehow a red super bright firefly walking up and down on a small plant. We went to check the next day in the morning, and there was nothing that could have caused this. The area that we were thinking it was didn't have any bushes or anything. It was a clear patch, and we didn't see anything else. Then it appeared again the next night. My parents were baffled. I remember several people from the neighborhood and other relatives that didn't live there come to see it, all coming up with their own theories. My little cousin and I decided to go check, but after we had started walking down the alleyway, an owl scared us and we ran back for our lives. I remember a teenager also walking down there, but getting too scared to continue. I think it may have appeared a night or two more until it didn't anymore, and we never got an explanation. There were no lights in the backyard, and there were no houses to the sides that could maybe cause a light to reflect on something shining in the ground. If you'd ask me today what it looked like, it was like those red lights that cyclists use on their bikes, but dimmer. At the time, though, I had nothing to compare it with. Our neighborhood was poor. People didn't have devices that emit light like we do today, where it could be anything, someone with a small radio, a phone, a laser, or something like that. seeing. This has been bugging me for years, and I still have no answers, so I decided I would share. When I was a kid, talking 5 years old, I used to see weird, colorful shapes flying in my room. It sounds crazy at first, but listen. At the time, I was sharing one room with my parents, and I had a separate bed, and it was right next to the wall, opposing the windows. I always hated going to bed because I could never fall asleep, and I would just stare at the ceiling, sitting in the dark for hours. This was my everyday routine for a while, until one night something different happened. I saw 3 shapes, a heart, a square, and a circle, in the colors yellow, red, and blue, entering the room through the windows. The windows were not open, they just passed right through them. The shapes were bright and neon-y. They were flying close to the ceiling, one after another, and they just went across the room and disappeared through the wall that my bed was next to. I wasn't scared, however, I was so confused and weirded out. I decided I wouldn't tell my parents. My dad is more into paranormal stuff and aliens, so I had high hopes that he would believe me. I stayed up for the night to see for myself. But I felt as if I'm not meant to say anything about the situation. I just had this gut feeling, if you will, that this whole thing is just a little secret and I'm not supposed to share. And since at the time I wasn't scared, the shapes were doing anything wrong, I don't think, and I had no problem with keeping it to myself. Now I kind of feel sorry because it was really interesting, and it would have been nice if I had more proof of this happening with my dad as a witness, but it's whatever. So after the shapes kept coming for a few nights, they suddenly stopped. The last night they came, they didn't do their usual thing. And the difference is that they turned colorless, like grayish, which now I interpret as their end. Skeptic here, but I have a reason to think I may be living in a haunted house. How can I confirm? Last May, I moved into an old 6-bedroom house in the Navarte neighborhood of Mexico City. The house has been shared among a group of friends and colleagues for a couple of years. It's a bit of a revolving door as far as the tenants and roommates go. Several of these people have shared creepy stories about the house. Most of the stories lacked any meaningful details, i.e., the window rattled, I didn't take anyone seriously. I thought they were all paranoid until last Friday night. It seems somewhat worth noting that most of these stories happen on or adjacent to our back patio, no idea why. So on Friday night, myself, one roommate, Diego, and his girlfriend were all sitting at a table on the patio talking. It was already after dark, so we had the patio light turned on. Our sliding glass patio door was open. At roughly 8:15, somebody turned off the patio light on us and slammed the sliding glass door shut. For context, the patio light switch is located inside the house, so we couldn't see who flipped the switch. Diego commented, "Well, that was rude." It was abrupt, but not that strange. Our other roommates, Armando and Carly, lived upstairs, and they're sometimes sensitive about sound. I assumed that maybe they heard us and got annoyed. Or maybe they didn't hear us and simply thought that we left the light on and the door open when we left. I stood up and went inside, turned the light back on, and this time when I returned to the patio, I slid the glass door closed. The next afternoon, I talked to Armando, and he said that he and Carly, their boyfriend and girlfriend, had left the house around 7:30 p.m. Friday to visit the mall and see Diablo's baseball game. They weren't home when the light shuttered and the door closed. I was surprised. That same Saturday afternoon at the same patio table we were sitting at the evening before, Diego and 3 friends were having a beer. There was one empty chair at the table. Suddenly, the empty chair, or someone sitting in the empty chair, whistled at everyone. Everybody paused and looked at each other. On Monday, yesterday, I ran into Bito, a friend of the company who used to live in the house. I told him about the weekend, and he said, Wait until you see the girl." This was the second, possibly third time I'd heard of a little girl in the house. Another instance was by the manager of our company, Yolo, who also said that she saw a little girl in the house. This is nearly impossible as almost no one here has a child, and none of the parents we know have ever brought their kids to the house. Now, I understand that they're all fairly minor instances, and maybe they could be explained away. Maybe one or more of our friends are tricksters, but it's starting to feel like that's not the case. Other slightly off occurrences are as follows. Someone, in quotes, randomly threw straws out of the window at our friend while they sat on the patio, and no one was home. Julian saw someone move inside Diego's bedroom through the window. Diego wasn't home. Armando heard voices directly outside his bedroom door as if someone was in the hall. No one was home. This particular case is the only one where we thought the voices may have just been carried from outside, because the house is big and kind of echoey. Anyone ever experienced an event with a shadow person? Just some background info on my situation, which occurred when I was around 10. So the house I lived in with my mom, dad, and occasionally my 5 siblings, we had all experienced one thing or another. So when this event I'm about to be describing happened, me, 10, was in my brother's room, 13. We were chilling around. He was lying down on the floor by his bed, and I was playing with a yoga ball, maybe 10 steps away. He had been talking, but he had stopped. I just thought he was tired. I played for 5 minutes, then looked over at him, and I froze. Above him, floating, was some sort of black mass, and he looked as if he was choking. His eyes were bulging out of his head, and his face was turning red in color. I yelled to my mom to come up, and I was crying. She came into the room running, and as soon as she saw him, she ran and got her Bible and started reciting something from it, which must have worked, as the black mass soon subsided to nothingness. But not before us hearing my brother let out a demonic deep scream. He then laid there with his eyes closed for a while. He then sprung up, panting, trying to get his breath back. We left that house the same day and stayed with family, but it seemed as if we could all still see the dark shadow. We couldn't tell if it had followed us or if it was the trauma, but to be safe, we went to a priest to get the house blessed, and we had an exorcist perform on my brother. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he started talking in a voice that wasn't his. We couldn't tell what he was saying. He seemed good after that was done, though. He returned back to himself, and our house now has such a light atmosphere, and it feels nice and cozy. I'm not sure what it was that we were all getting targeted by, but it was for sure evil.